What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected actors walks into a late-night interview expecting a friendly conversation, only to be blindsided by a host who seems determined to provoke him? In just 38 seconds, what started as casual banter exploded into one of the most uncomfortable confrontations in late-night television history, leaving audiences shocked and the host scrambling to justify behavior that would ultimately expose him as nothing more than an entitled bully hiding behind his desk. The evening began like any other taping. Samuel L. Jackson arrived at the studio after a long day of press interviews promoting his latest action thriller. He'd done dozens of these talk show appearances over his decades-long career, always bringing his trademark energy and humor to every conversation. The audience was packed, excited to see one of their favorite actors. The cameras were rolling. Everything seemed normal. Jimmy Kimmel walked out to applause, that familiar smirk plastered across his face. He shook Samuel's hand as the actor settled into the guest chair, and for the first minute or two, things went smoothly. They talked about the new movie, shared a few laughs about life in Hollywood, and the audience seemed engaged. But anyone watching closely could sense something different in the host's demeanor. His smile didn't quite reach his eyes. His questions felt slightly sharper than usual. Something was brewing beneath the surface. Then came the turn. Without warning, Jimmy leaned back in his chair and said, with a condescending chuckle, "You know, Samuel, I've been wondering something. Do you ever get tired of playing the same angry guy in every single movie? I mean, at this point, aren't you just phoning it in?" The studio audience went silent. You could feel the tension ripple through the room. Samuel's expression shifted immediately. His friendly smile faded, replaced by a look of genuine confusion mixed with rising anger. He sat up straighter. In his chair, his eyes locked on Jimmy. "Excuse me?" Samuel said, his voice measured but clearly annoyed. "What did you just say to me?" Jimmy, either oblivious to the line he'd just crossed or deliberately pushing further, laughed it off. "Come on, man, you know what I'm talking about. The tough guy thing. The yelling. The cursing. It's like your whole career is just you being angry at stuff. Don't you ever want to, I don't know, try something different? Show some range?" Samuel's jaw tightened. He took a breath, clearly trying to maintain his composure. "Jimmy, let me tell you something. I've been acting for over 40 years. I've done drama, comedy, action, everything in between. I've worked with some of the greatest directors in the world. And you're sitting here on your little talk show telling me I don't have range? That I phone it in?" The audience shifted uncomfortably. A few nervous laughs escaped here and there, but mostly people just watched in stunned silence. This wasn't the playful back and forth they'd expected. This was real tension, real anger bubbling to the surface. Jimmy's smile wavered slightly, but he pressed on, perhaps thinking he could turn it into a joke. Hey, relax. I'm just messing with you. You're so sensitive. Can't you take a joke anymore? This is what we do here. We have fun. We roast each other a little bit. It's all in good fun." But Samuel wasn't having it. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a more serious tone. "No, Jimmy, there's a difference between roasting someone and being straight up disrespectful. You invited me here as your guest, and the first thing you do is insult my entire career? That's not a joke. That's just you being rude because you think you can get away with it behind that desk." The cameramen glanced at each other. The producers in the control room were probably panicking. This was live television, and things were spiraling fast. Jimmy tried to laugh it off again, waving his hand dismissively. "Oh, come on, Samuel. You're overreacting. I compliment you all the time. You're a legend. Everybody knows that. I was just trying to have a little fun with you." Samuel shook his head slowly. "You call that fun? Let me tell you what would be fun, Jimmy. Fun would be if you actually did your homework before bringing guests on your show. Fun would be if you showed some respect for the people who take time out of their schedules to come sit in that chair and help boost your ratings. But instead, you want to tear people down to make yourself feel important. That's not fun. That's just sad." The audience was completely silent now. No laughter, no applause. Just uncomfortable silence as they watched this confrontation unfold. Jimmy's face had gone from amused to defensive. He shifted in his seat, his voice taking on an edge. "Look, Samuel, I don't know what's gotten into you tonight, but maybe you should calm down. You're making a scene here. This is my show, and I don't appreciate you coming in here and acting like I'm the bad guy when all I did was make a harmless joke. That was it. That was the moment everything changed." Samuel stood up from his chair, pulling off his microphone. The audience gasped. Jimmy's eyes went wide, clearly not expecting this reaction. Your show? Samuel said, his voice rising now. Yeah, it is your show, Jimmy. And you know what? That means you're responsible for the garbage that comes out of your mouth. You want to talk about making a scene? You made the scene when you decided to disrespect me for no reason. I came here to promote my film, to have a good time, maybe make your audience laugh. But you couldn't help yourself. You had to take a shot at me because that's what you do. You sit behind that desk and you think it makes you untouchable. Well, guess what? I don't need this. I don't need you. And I definitely don't need to sit here and be insulted on live television by someone who's never done anything close to what I've done in my career. Jimmy stood up too, his face flushed red. Are you serious right now? You're going to walk out? After everything we've done for you? We gave you a platform. We promoted your movie, and this is how you repay us? Samuel let out a bitter laugh. You gave me a platform? Jimmy, I don't need your platform. People know who I am. They've known who I am for decades. You're the one who needs guests like me to come on your show so people actually tune in. And this is how you treat them? By insulting them and then playing victim when they call you out? The security guards had started moving toward the stage, unsure if they needed to intervene. The audience sat frozen, phones out, recording every second of this disaster. Jimmy's producers were frantically gesturing from off stage, trying to signal something, anything, to salvage the situation. Jimmy pointed at Samuel, his voice getting louder. You need to leave, right now. Get off my stage. If you can't handle a little joke, then you don't deserve to be here. Security, please escort Mr. Jackson out of the building. Samuel held up his hand to the approaching security guards, stopping them in their tracks. He looked directly into the camera, addressing the audience at home. I want everyone watching to see this. This is what happens when you stand up to a bully. This is what happens when you refuse to let someone disrespect you just because they have a TV show. Jimmy Kimmel just showed you exactly who he is. Remember this moment. Then he turned back to Jimmy, his voice calm but firm. I'm leaving, Jimmy. Not because you told me to, but because I choose to. I choose not to be part of whatever this is. And you can bet that everyone in Hollywood is going to hear about this. Good luck getting any respectable guest after tonight. With that, Samuel walked off the stage, his head held high. The audience didn't know whether to clap or stay silent. Most just sat there in shock. Jimmy stood at his desk, his face a mixture of anger and panic, realizing that he'd just made a massive mistake in front of millions of viewers. But before Samuel disappeared completely backstage, he paused at the curtain and turned back one last time. His voice carried across the silent studio. You know what the saddest part is, Jimmy? I actually used to respect you. I thought you were different from the other late-night hosts. I thought you genuinely cared about your guests and your craft. But tonight, you showed me that you're just another person who got a little bit of power and let it go straight to your head. You think being behind that desk gives you the right to say whatever you want, to treat people however you want. But it doesn't. And one day, you're going to realize that. Jimmy opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. What could he say? The damage was done. The cameras were still rolling, capturing every second of his humiliation. His staff looked horrified. The audience remained silent, many shaking their heads in disappointment. Finally, Jimmy tried to regain control. He cleared his throat, forcing a smile that looked more like a grimace. Well, that was unexpected. Let's go to a commercial break. We'll be right back, folks. But the cameras didn't cut away immediately. For a few precious seconds, viewers at home could see Jimmy's facade crumble. His smile disappeared. He put his head in his hands. His shoulders slumped. He looked like a man who knew he'd just destroyed his own reputation on live television. Meanwhile, backstage, Samuel was being swarmed by staff members, apologizing profusely, trying to smooth things over. But he waved them off politely. It's not your fault, he told them. Your boss made his choices. He'll have to live with them. The thing is, Samuel was right. You can't invite someone onto your show, insult them to their face, and then act surprised when they don't take it lying down. Jimmy had gotten so used to his position of power, so comfortable in his role as the host who controls the narrative, that he forgot a basic truth. Respect is earned, not given. And in those 38 seconds when he decided to attack Samuel's entire career for a cheap laugh, he lost whatever respect he might have had. What made it worse was Jimmy's response. Instead of apologizing, instead of acknowledging that maybe he'd gone too far, he doubled down. He got defensive. He blamed Samuel for being too sensitive, for not being able to take a joke. He pulled out every excuse in the book rather than simply admitting he was wrong. That's the mark of someone who's let their position go to their head, someone who believes they're untouchable. The audience in the studio that night would never forget what they witnessed. Many of them had come expecting to see their favorite actor in a fun, lighthearted interview. Instead, they got a masterclass in what happens when someone refuses to be disrespected. They saw a man with decades of experience and success stand up for himself against someone who thought his platform gave him immunity from consequences. And here's the thing about Samuel's reaction. It was completely justified. He didn't storm off immediately. He gave Jimmy multiple chances to walk back the insult, to apologize, to acknowledge that he'd crossed a line. But Jimmy didn't take any of those opportunities. He kept pushing, kept dismissing Samuel's legitimate concerns, kept trying to paint himself as the victim of an overreaction. When someone tells you that you've hurt them or disrespected them, the appropriate response is not to tell them they're being too sensitive. The appropriate response is to listen, to consider whether you actually did cross a line, and to apologize if you did. But Jimmy couldn't do that. His ego wouldn't let him. Let's talk about that initial comment for a moment. Do you ever get tired of playing the same angry guy in every single movie? Think about how insulting that is to an actor of Samuel L. Jackson's caliber. Here's someone who's been in over 150 films, who's worked with Martin Scorsese, Quentin Tarantino, Spike Lee, and countless other legendary directors. He's played everything from a drug addict in Jungle Fever, to a philosophical hitman in Pulp Fiction, to a Jedi Master in Star Wars. He's done Shakespeare, he's done comedy, he's done drama, he's done action. And Jimmy reduces all of that to the same angry guy. That's not a joke, that's ignorance wrapped in arrogance. It's the kind of comment someone makes when they haven't actually paid attention to the work, when they're going for a cheap laugh at the expense of their guest. And what makes it even worse is that Jimmy clearly prepared this comment in advance. This wasn't some off-the-cuff remark. He thought about it, decided it would be funny, and went with it, despite knowing it would probably upset his guest. That calculation, that deliberate choice to insult someone for entertainment value, reveals everything you need to know about Jimmy's character in that moment. He valued getting a reaction, getting a laugh from his audience, more than he valued treating his guests with basic respect and dignity. And when Samuel called him out on it, Jimmy's immediate instinct was to gaslight him. "You're so sensitive. Can't you take a joke?" These are classic deflection tactics used by people who know they've messed up but don't want to admit it. They shift the blame onto the person they hurt, making it seem like the problem is the victim's reaction rather than their own actions. But Samuel saw right through it. He understood exactly what was happening. He'd been in this industry long enough to recognize manipulation when he saw it. So he refused to play along. He refused to laugh it off and pretend everything was fine. He stood his ground and made it clear that this behavior was unacceptable. The confrontation escalated because Jimmy couldn't let it go. He could have diffused the entire situation with 3 simple words. "I'm sorry, man." That's all it would have taken. But his pride, his need to be right, his belief that he was entitled to say whatever he wanted on his own show, prevented him from taking that simple step. Instead, he got defensive. "This is my show." "Yes, Jimmy, it is your show, which means you're responsible for everything that happens on it, including when you disrespect your guests. Owning a platform doesn't give you the right to abuse it. If anything, it gives you more responsibility to use it wisely and treat people well." Then came Jimmy's most entitled statement of the night. "After everything we've done for you, we gave you a platform." This might be the most delusional thing he said during the entire confrontation. The idea that Jimmy Kimmel's late-night show was doing Samuel L. Jackson a favor by having him on is laughable. Samuel doesn't need Jimmy. He's one of the highest-grossing actors of all time. He's got more talent and accomplishments than Jimmy could ever dream of achieving. If anyone was doing anyone a favor, it was Samuel doing Jimmy a favor by agreeing to come on the show. These celebrity guests boost ratings. They bring in viewers who might not otherwise watch. They lend credibility and star power to the program. To suggest that the guest should be grateful for the opportunity to be insulted on television is peak entitlement. Samuel's response to that comment was perfect. He stripped away Jimmy's delusion and laid bare the truth. "You're the one who needs guests like me to come on your show so people actually tune in." Harsh? Maybe, but also accurate. Late-night talk shows rely heavily on celebrity guests. Without them, you just have a host talking to an empty chair. The power dynamic that Jimmy thought he had was an illusion, and Samuel shattered it. When Jimmy ordered security to escort Samuel out, it was a last-ditch attempt to regain control of the situation. But even that backfired. Samuel stopped the security guards with a simple gesture and chose to leave on his own terms. He didn't let Jimmy have the satisfaction of kicking him out. He maintained his dignity and his agency throughout the entire confrontation. And then came that final statement, looking directly into the camera, speaking to the viewers at home. I want everyone watching to see this. This is what happens when you stand up to a bully. Samuel understood something important in that moment. He realized that this wasn't just about him and Jimmy anymore. This was about sending a message to everyone watching that it's okay to stand up for yourself, even when the person disrespecting you has power and influence. How many times have we seen celebrities sit through uncomfortable interviews, laughing off insulting comments, playing along with jokes that aren't really jokes? How many times have we watched someone be disrespected on television and just smile through it because they don't want to cause a scene or burn bridges? Samuel's walkout was refreshing because it showed that you don't have to accept that treatment. You can say no. You can walk away. The pause at the curtain, that moment when Samuel turned back for one final statement, was devastating. He didn't yell. He didn't curse. He simply spoke the truth. I actually used to respect you. Past tense. Used to. Those words probably stung Jimmy more than anything else Samuel said that night because they represented a complete loss of respect from someone whose opinion should have mattered. When Samuel said, "You think being behind that desk gives you the right to say whatever you want, to treat people however you want?" He identified the core problem with Jimmy's behavior: power without accountability, influence without responsibility, the belief that your position protects you from having to treat people with basic human decency. Jimmy's attempt to regain control after Samuel left was pathetic. That forced smile, the awkward transition to commercial, the visible crumbling of his composure when he thought the cameras had stopped rolling. All of it showed a man who knew he'd messed up badly, but still didn't quite understand how or why. The staff backstage apologizing to Samuel tells you everything you need to know about who was in the wrong. These were people who worked for Jimmy, who were on his payroll, and even they recognized that what their boss did was unacceptable. They were embarrassed to be associated with his behavior. This incident revealed something important about the nature of respect and power in the entertainment industry. For too long, hosts like Jimmy have operated under the assumption that their platform gives them immunity. They can say what they want, do what they want, and the guests will just smile and go along with it because they need the exposure. But Samuel proved that assumption wrong. He showed that some people can't be bought or intimidated. Some people have enough self-respect and enough accomplishments that they don't need to tolerate disrespect just to promote a movie. They can walk away, and the loss is entirely the host's. The 38 seconds that changed everything wasn't just the initial insult. It was the window of opportunity Jimmy had to make things right. From the moment he made that comment about Samuel playing the same angry guy, to the moment Samuel stood up to leave, 38 seconds passed. 38 seconds during which Jimmy could have apologized, could have acknowledged he went too far, could have salvaged the situation, but he didn't. He wasted those 38 seconds doubling down, making excuses, and getting defensive. Those 38 seconds cost him his credibility, his dignity, and the respect of everyone watching. That's how quickly things can fall apart when pride gets in the way of basic decency. Think about what this confrontation means for the broader context of late-night television. For years, these shows have operated on a formula. Host invites guest, host roasts guest a little bit, guest laughs it off, everyone has fun. But that formula only works when there's mutual respect underlying it. When the roasting comes from a place of genuine affection and the guest knows they're in on the joke. What Jimmy did wasn't roasting, it was insulting. There's a difference. Roasting involves clever jokes that everyone can laugh at. Insulting involves attacking someone's character or accomplishments in a way that's meant to diminish them. Jimmy crossed that line, and Samuel made sure everyone knew it. The audience's reaction throughout the confrontation was telling. At first, nervous laughter, unsure whether this was part of the bit. Then silence as they realized this was real. Then visible discomfort as the situation escalated. And finally, at the end, many shaking their heads in disappointment. The people who had come to be entertained instead witnessed something uncomfortable and ugly. But maybe that's not a bad thing. Maybe sometimes entertainment needs to be uncomfortable. Maybe sometimes we need to see these confrontations play out so we can talk about them, learn from them, and hopefully prevent them from happening again. Maybe Samuel walking out will make other hosts think twice before insulting their guests for a cheap laugh. The power of Samuel's walkout lies in its simplicity. He didn't need to throw things or have a dramatic meltdown. He simply stated his case clearly, stood his ground, and left with his dignity intact. That's more powerful than any tantrum could ever be. It showed strength, self-respect, and an unwillingness to compromise his values for the sake of someone else's entertainment. Jimmy's fundamental mistake was forgetting that respect goes both ways. Yes, it's his show. Yes, he's the host. But that doesn't mean he owns the people who sit in that guest chair. They're not there to be his punching bag. They're not there to inflate his ego or make him look good at their own expense. They're there for a mutually beneficial exchange. They promote their work, he gets content for his show. When Jimmy violated that unspoken agreement by insulting Samuel, he broke the trust that makes these interviews work. And once that trust is broken, once a guest realizes they're not being treated as an equal, but as entertainment fodder, the whole dynamic falls apart. What's particularly frustrating about Jimmy's behavior is that it was so unnecessary. He could have had a perfectly pleasant interview with Samuel. They could have talked about the movie, shared funny stories, maybe done a silly game or segment. The audience would have been happy. Samuel would have been happy. Everyone wins. But Jimmy chose to go for the edgy comment instead. He chose to try to get a reaction by being provocative. And he got a reaction, just not the one he wanted. He got called out, embarrassed, and left looking like a fool on his own show. The lesson here is simple. Treat people with respect, especially when they're your guests. Don't hide behind the excuse of, it's just a joke, when you say something hurtful. Don't assume your position gives you the right to say whatever you want. And when someone tells you that you've crossed a line, listen to them instead of getting defensive. Samuel L. Jackson walked out of that studio with his head held high, his reputation intact, and the respect of everyone who witnessed what happened. Jimmy Kimmel stayed at his desk, flustered and exposed, having shown the world exactly what happens when entitlement meets accountability. In those 38 seconds, everything changed. A routine interview became a teachable moment. A cheap joke became a career-defining mistake. And a respected actor reminded everyone that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply stand up, speak your truth, and walk away. Looking back at the whole confrontation, what stands out most is the contrast between the two men. Samuel remained calm, articulate, and measured, even as his anger grew. He made his points clearly and backed them up with logic and reason. He never resorted to personal attacks or low blows. He simply stated facts about Jimmy's behavior and explained why it was unacceptable. Jimmy, on the other hand, became increasingly flustered and defensive. His arguments fell apart under even the slightest scrutiny. His attempts to paint himself as the victim were transparently false. His claim that he was just joking rang hollow when confronted with the genuine hurt he'd caused. Everything about his response screamed of someone who knew he was wrong but couldn't bring himself to admit it. The incident also highlights how important it is to know your audience and your guests. Jimmy clearly didn't do his research. If he had, he would have known that Samuel has spoken many times about the diversity of his roles, about his training as an actor, about his love for the craft. He would have known that reducing Samuel's career to playing angry guys would be particularly offensive given how much effort Samuel has put into showing his range. But Jimmy didn't know that, or didn't care. He went for the easy joke without considering how it would land. And when it blew up in his face, he had no backup plan. He just kept digging himself deeper, making the situation worse with every word he said. There's something to be said about the timing of this confrontation too. It happened in an era where audiences are increasingly tired of celebrities being treated poorly for entertainment. People are more aware of power dynamics, more critical of bullying behavior, even when it's disguised as comedy. Samuel's walkout resonated with viewers because it represented a broader cultural shift toward demanding respect and calling out inappropriate behavior. What makes Samuel's handling of the situation so admirable is that he never lost control. He had every right to explode, to curse Jimmy out, to make a huge scene. But he didn't. He maintained his composure and his dignity throughout. He made his point without stooping to Jimmy's level. He proved that you can stand up for yourself forcefully without being unprofessional. In the end, the confrontation between Samuel L. Jackson and Jimmy Kimmel became more than just a dramatic television moment. It became a statement about respect, about power, about standing up for yourself even when it's uncomfortable. Samuel showed that you don't have to accept mistreatment just because someone has a platform. Jimmy showed what happens when you let your position convince you that you're untouchable.